Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining. My name is Eric Velasquez. I'm the host of Alamo City Agenda, and it's Blue Monday, I guess, right?
Obviously. Yes.
Blue Monday. When we're here with candidate Trish DeBerry for Bexar County Court Judge. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you.
Bexar County. Why did I say
That's
court?
okay. There's a lot of confusion between the judge and commissioner's court and the county courts and the district court. So let me make that clear. Yes, it's county judge for commissioner's court.
Yeah, which is not a court.
Yeah, so. It's not a court, and you don't have to have a law degree. Yes.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Do you have a gavel?
Yeah, but you have a gavel.
Okay.
Yes, you do.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Would you ever want to?
I would love to be able to do that. Yes. I wish I had one with my children.
Right.
You are out of order.
Out of order.
You are out of order. Yes.
So tell me about your campaign, or tell us a little bit about yourself.
Born and raised here in San Antonio. Okay. Native San Antonian. Probably the weirdest looks I get was when I talk about the fact that born and raised here, my dad was in the Air Force, which is how we got to San Antonio, the youngest of 6 children. I was the only one of the 6 that did not travel across the world, basically. Grew up in one place, so I've been here since elementary school. Went to high school, went to 2 different colleges, went to UTSA for 2 years when it was in its infancy. Go Roadrunners, woohoo, here we go. Yes, I love my Roadrunners. And then I was gonna go to UT. But then Trinity University offered me a partial scholarship, so I wound up there, majoring in communications and minoring in political science, which is what I really wanted to do. And at that point, my parents were kind of like, look, if there's an opportunity for you to go to a school that's really known for its communications program and you got a scholarship opportunity, that's where you need to go. So stayed there. My senior year at Trinity, I wound up getting an internship at Ken's TV. Okay. So I went to school, I worked part-time, and I had an internship. So I was no stranger to hard work, for sure. Plus I had a partial student loan too, so I had to get that paid off as well. So I got my foot in the door at Ken's TV, not just reporting, but producing news. And I really like producing behind the scenes because it was multitasking and you're in charge of everything, and there's nothing more awesome than a great show.
Watch out, Salo. Watch out.
Yeah, but live, well, we have conversations about that. But live television can go to heck in a handbasket very quickly, as Salo knows too. So, you can have great shows, and then you're brought back down to earth because you can have really bad shows. But produce telethons, produce the 5, 6, and 10 o'clock newscasts. Did some political reporting. Reported at City Hall or whatever, and then left that business 10 years later and went to found my own PR company with 2 other partners, and we had as many as 85 people in a full-service advertising agency, which was a great run. Then we had a partner that healthcare was really her wheelhouse, and she wanted to go into healthcare, and it caused my partner Frank Guerra and I, who had worked in television together, to kind of re-examine where we wanted to be. And I wanted to do a lot of crisis communications, social, digital, because it was the rise of social digital, which was a fascinating time to be a part of that. And public relations, which obviously I'm very skilled at because I've done that for 25 years. Right. But went on and found a second business, which was the DeBerry Group, which has now morphed into Talk Strategy. So, I've been a small business owner for a majority of my life, for 25 years, an entrepreneur, employed people, which at the end of the day, Eric, that's really why I decided I was going to run for the office of county commissioner when I did, because I thought the court needed pragmatic business know-how and what that looks like. Because a lot of times we, get into a rut regarding politics, and it's professional politicians that have been there forever. So, obviously I had not held office before, and it's kind of what I wanted to do. I wanted to come in and on the court, and I was like, we're not going to rubber stamp everything anymore, because as a business owner, that's not what I do either. I ask tough questions. I hold people accountable. We've got to look at spending practices and overhead and what we're dealing with. And so I think it was really important.
So with that, considering the business standpoint, how can people trust that you will have the best intentions for the people, not just the business owners? Because we've seen a lot of money being sent over to businesses for whatever reason, and how can we get that to ensure that you will actually still look out for like the little people, so to say, like the actual community rather than just the business owners?
Yeah, well, I'm proud to be a small business owner because obviously 85% of the economy, not just in San Antonio, but across the United States, is built on the backs of small business owners. So we can't forget that. And I think that's something that I took to heart when I got into office. It wasn't just about big business. It was, what are we doing to help out small business owners, whether they were the grants that we doled out during the pandemic. Small businesses were the hardest hit during the pandemic. And I think if you ask Judge Wolf what was one of the biggest mistakes he made during the pandemic, it was shutting down small businesses because they are the lifeblood of the economy. And I truly believe that having somebody in office that has that kind of skill set that will not only advocate for small businesses, but know what it's like. Because, Eric, I go to bed every night. Since I've opened up a business, you go to bed and lay your head on the pillow and you're like, I'm responsible for these people.
Right.
I'm putting food on the table for them and their kids and their families. It's a tough road to hoe. And then I have some people who are like, oh, it must be great because you've got your own small business. You don't answer to anybody. I was like, I answer to people all the time. I answer to employees. I answer to clients. It's a very fulfilling opportunity to be able to own a small business and employ people and create something that you have a vision for and that you really want to be a part of and that people want to work for you. Because that's the other thing is, being a small business owner, I think you're always shocked and surprised sometimes because you're like, well, people really want to come to work for me because of the good work that we're doing.
The culture.
Yeah, the culture that we've established, which I think is important. And, look, I did a lot of pro bono work in the community as a small business owner, probably a lot more than I could have afforded. When I look at, what we were able to do for not just the American Sunrise Organization, but for David's Legacy and cyberbullying. We probably put close to $250,000 of pro bono work into anti-cyberbullying legislation and what that meant, and continue to advocate for that because the Mohlocks are a very good friend of mine, friends of mine both. And in fact, today, I'm going to be accepting a grant from the Texas Cavaliers on behalf of David's Legacy. So those are the things I love the work I do from a client perspective, but probably what fulfills my heart, the most, is what I do for the nonprofit community.
Gotcha. Now, backtrack a little bit. You were talking about being able to mentorship, or what was it? Not mentorship, but I forget the word.
Culture?
No, it was
advocacy, outreach, community, nonprofit.
I'm having a brain fart. You were saying, I cannot think of the word right now.
Okay.
I guess we'll just come back to it.
Yeah, that's fine.
Man.
It's all good. Yeah.
Anyway, so about the budgets. So what are some things that you would like to see going forward if you do get elected? What's the first thing you're going to tackle with the budgets?
So, it's, billions of dollars as far as that budget is concerned. So one of my, major tenets associated with what the budget looks like, because the largest line item in the budget is University Health System regarding what we're doing, from a health standpoint, a public health standpoint. So, when I was in office as a county commissioner, I advocated for a merger between Metro Health over the city and University Health System, because if you look at Metro Health, probably funded at a rate of $40 million and have been over the past several years, about that much, but about half of that is grant funding.
Right.
So really only $20 million comes out of the budget. So they're reliant upon a lot of federal grants and funding associated with that. But they stumbled a little bit, obviously, coming out of the gate during the pandemic. 4 to 6 changes in leadership associated with that. I think they have a very good guy in place right now, but I still think there are huge opportunities associating with merging Metro Health with UHS, because when you look at the resources associated with UHS, $2.8 billion budget, their association with UTL Science Center. So I'm not saying necessarily that the city would have to give up decision-making powers. I'm like, look, give the city a couple of seats on the board of University Health System so they're weighing into the decision-making process. However, we can scale impact so far in this community, which I think what we all saw during the pandemic was the issues that we have here from a public health standpoint were underscored by COVID, whether it was morbid obesity, whether it was heart disease, whether it was diabetes. And quite honestly, when you talk to vascular surgeons, we are still, quite honestly, cutting off people's ankles, and feet or whatever at far too high a rate. It's a sad statistic associated with that. But so the opportunity to really scale impact associated with public health with a merger of some sort, I think is a phenomenal idea. Now, is that easy? No. But, I've been known to take on difficult issues, and this is one of them. But I think it's a win-win, not just for the city, but for the county and the entire community of Bexar County regarding public health, because I just don't think we have moved the needle in the way that we need to regarding the diseases that I've talked about, not to mention the fact we have a food desert issue. Yeah. We have a poverty rate here in Bexar County that is probably still similar to what it was during the 1980s. So there are things that we need to be doing differently. So not only can we scale impact regarding public health, it's a great opportunity for city-county consolidation, which people have talked about forever, about not, talking the talk, but I've got a real example here. So I'm not just going to talk the talk, I'm going to walk the walk. If we can get this done, this makes government much more efficient. We avoid duplication of services, we scale impact. It's what people want government to do. It's not about bloating and fat government. It's about how do we scale it down and how do we really scale the impact and do important change in this community, which needs to happen.
So you think by merging those two, that would make a little bit less government added onto that?
Well, absolutely, it's less government, but it's also the first domino that falls regarding city-county consolidation. What else do we look at? We have two magistration offices, the city and the county, which, by the way, is a complete waste of taxpayer money. We got to figure this out, and some of it is like check your egos at the door so that we can figure this out. County has one. They didn't consult with the city. City got mad about it, so they still use the city, but it's ridiculous that we have two magistration offices. We need to figure this out. We need to come together. So yes, I would tell you that a merger between Metro Health and UHS, as well as the magistration offices, make complete economic sense, not only for the Bexar County taxpayer, but for government in general.
Gotcha. Okay. Twist, we're going to take a different turn. What's your favorite Fiesta event?
My favorite, oh my gosh, I love all kinds of Fiesta events. And look, one of my proudest moments actually as a young person, because I'm not going to say how old I am right now, but I was crowned Miss Fiesta in 1984 when I was 19 years old. Okay. So I have a deep and abiding love for Fiesta because I visited all the events. I got to go to Minneapolis and St. Paul to that festival that they have there, during the wintertime or whatever. So I got to know a lot of people associated with that experience, and I just look back on it with such fond memories. I mean, it really helped mold me into the person I am today because I felt like Miss Fiesta is what I would call the people's queen. I mean, it's, you're not anointed. It doesn't matter how much money you have to be able to get there. It's a competition, and believe it or not, so the competition was you had to portray a woman in Texas history.
Okay.
So guess who I portrayed?
Ooh.
I don't know if there's a little serendipity at play here. So I portrayed Miriam Ma Ferguson. She was the first female governor of Texas.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
So, my skit that you had to do was really her kind of like looking in the mirror and her inauguration speech about what she wanted to accomplish. And I wrapped it up with, imagínate una mujer, like imagine a woman, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's part and parcel about, like, I'm one of the first females in 25 years on Commissioner's Court. It's been a long time since we've had a female as county judge. And so I like to say that sometimes, the gods are at work and at play, and we never know what that looks like or whatever. But I feel like when I was 19, I was portraying a woman in Texas history, and 35 years later, I'm still here today doing the same thing.
That's awesome.
I'm not portraying a woman in Texas history. I am the woman
There
who's
you go,
in
there you
Texas
go.
history. So
As a woman in leadership, how do you look forward to empowering women in this workforce, in this field?
Yeah, it's one of my most passionate topics. I mean, it hits very close to home for me because I was raised by a single mother who had 6 kids. My parents divorced. My mother worked in civil service at Fort Sam Houston. She was head of military pay, and she worked really, really hard. And, part of my story is I think it's easy to see Trish DeBerry as somebody who was born with a silver spoon in her mouth because of the success that I've been able to achieve in life. But nothing could be further from the truth. We struggled to make ends meet. We had 6 children in a household that shared 1 bathroom, which was super interesting at times because I had 2 brothers and 4 sisters. And, I give a lot of credit to my mom for what she was able to do because she did. She worked full time as a single mom. And so for that reason, I'm really very, very passionate about, women's issues. It's completely the reason why I took on the domestic violence issue when I was on Commissioner's Court. Appropriated a record amount of money regarding making sure we're not just moving the backlog of cases regarding domestic violence, but the DA needed more prosecutors, needed more investigators. We needed more help in the district courts regarding advocates for victims. One of the first places I toured when I got into office was the battered women's and children's shelter to see what was going on there. And it's, I have called it a public health crisis, domestic violence here in Bexar County, which it is. And unless we continue to move the needle regarding protecting women, and not just women, but children too, we're not going to get in this economy or in this county or in this city where we need to be. So
It seems like it got worse during COVID.
yeah, it did get worse during COVID. Yeah, because people had nowhere to go.
Yeah.
Which is why there was a backlog of cases. And I led the effort for resolution to make sure that all judges, not just the specialty courts regarding domestic violence, were hearing the cases to be able to move the backlog associated with it. So, one of my proudest moments on the court was not just the resolution to make sure we were clearing that backlog, but the money that was appropriated regarding more prosecutors and more investigators and what we were doing. And actually, I wanted to appropriate more money associated with it, but it is something that we have to continue to advocate for because and the other thing is I led the effort to make sure that we had more constables over in the constables' offices because we had a backlog of temporary protective orders. We had a backlog of temporary restraining orders that were not being served. They were piled high in baskets. Sheriff did not have the resources to be able to do that, and so constables can serve those orders. So we appropriated money, and I led the effort for that to make sure that we had more constables to be able to do that. Also sat down and established a process for the constables to be able to do that and have the wherewithal to be able to get done what they needed to get done. But one of my single proudest moments when I was on the campaign trail was when I was at a polling site and I had a gentleman come up to me and he worked with Child Protective Services. And he said, "Hey, you're the commissioner that got money for more constables so we could serve more temporary restraining orders and protective orders, right?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And I was like, "Very nice to meet you." And he said, "Let me tell you, we are so much more effective. The serve rate is the highest it's ever been regarding making sure that we're protecting women." And he shook my hand and he said, "I'm a lifelong Democrat, but I'm voting for you because of what you've done for women and children here."
That's awesome.
That's what you should do as a public official.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not about the party lines. It's
No,
about
it's not.
what's good for the
Yeah,
public.
exactly. And I was very successful in what I did regarding the resolution and appropriating money about reaching across party lines. I was the only Republican on the court, but I got support for a lot of things because it was in the best interest. It's not necessarily about viewing through a political filter. It is about what is the right thing to do.
Right.
And we have lost our way in politics regarding what is the right thing to do.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, no.
Get me on my soapbox.
It's true. It's true, though. Okay, so how? Okay, so if you are elected county judge,
Yes.
how are you going to make the relationship between you and the Bexar County Sheriff's better? Because it seems like it's a little bit rocky. There's been a little bit of issues and stuff like that. So what's your plan to maybe make things a little bit gel a little bit easier?
Well, just because we have differences in opinion on what needs to happen, and because when I came in office, it was not going to be a rubber stamp court anymore. I was not going to rubber stamp things, and when they come in, we're going to take a close look at it. So I will continue to ask tough questions, but look, we can all agree to disagree and get along in the end. I mean, that's the nature of politics, right? No permanent friends, no permanent enemies. And so, yes, when I'm Bexar County judge, whoever I have to work with, we're going to build a bridge and we're going to get it done. But I am going to still talk about the culture in the jail. What are we doing about that? Because there are morale issues, there are culture issues, we have retention issues, we have recruitment issues, and I'm not going to let down on that. But I'm incredibly proud to have the endorsement of the Deputy Sheriff's Association, because at the end of the day, it wasn't necessarily about criticism of the Deputy Sheriff. It was really about advocating for the rank and file for the Deputy Sheriff's Association regarding those that are working double and triple mandatory overtime shifts in the jail and never seeing their families, which they don't want to work there if that's the case, and they leave, right? It's about who's out on patrol in the outer areas of the county, and in the Alamo Ranch area, when you have one or two people patrolling, that's not right either. But I feel like as a small business person, I've got great ideas, and the opportunity regarding a consultant, which is what I advocated for in the court, a consultant coming in to give ideas regarding what we can do at the jail. But how are we benchmarking against other counties that are doing things really either innovative or outside the box? But despite what happened, obviously, with the deputy sheriff, I have amazing relationships with other folks that work within the county, whether it's the county courts. I count a lot of the judges as my friends. The DA and I had a great working relationship too. He felt like he could come to me anytime to ask. And one of my, the other issues that I got accomplished with the DA is I had been at a elder abuse senior citizen committee meeting, and I was told that, well, look, we've got SAPDs there, we can arrest people for elder fraud and abuse, but if we don't have people in the DA's office to be able to prosecute the cases, like, nothing's going to happen.
Right.
So I did call the DA down, and I said, hey, as well as members of this committee, and I said, look, this is what I'm hearing. And he said, well, we used to have an elder fraud unit at the DA's office, but we haven't had it for 5 years because we haven't had the money to be able to do it. And I said, I'm going to let you know, as county commissioner, and having parents who are seniors, my mom just passed away a year ago. My dad is 95, will be 96, gets a phone call every week, if not every other day, from someone who wants to take advantage of him. Yeah. And I told the DA, I said, look, I'll help to appropriate the money, because I think it's that important, because we have an aging population. And the elderly don't have the time to either get restitution restored or prosecute the people that are trying to take advantage of them. So at the end of the day, I did collectively get Commissioners Court to come together to restore the elder fraud unit at the DA's office, which had been vacant for 5 years. And not only did he get a prosecutor, he asked for an investigator, because a lot of times when it comes to elder abuse, it's a paper trail, because it's fraud, bank fraud, what have you. And so he needed the resources, and it's kind of tedious work. But he has a great guy in that office to be able to do that. But when I look at the things that I was able to accomplish in a year as a county commissioner, that elder fraud unit, domestic violence, and those things that I advocated for are uber important to this community.
So with that, because I know there's a lot of important things with small businesses. Yeah. During COVID, when everything was happening, a lot of the south side was neglected. The south side, the east side, the west side. So does that bring up anything to you that maybe we need to focus a little bit more on those sides? Because one, that's where a lot of the food deserts are at.
There's a lot about that.
There's a lot of poverty in there. So what would you like to see happen, being a county judge, to be able to help those communities?
Well, we absolutely have to focus on those communities, because when we look at the food deserts that exist, there are not choices or healthy choices that are being made. And when I talked about the poverty level, associated with it being close to the same as it was in the 1980s. We've got to be doing things differently. And it's a relationship between the city and the county. It's not just about the county, but the city needs to step up too, and how we do that. And I think it's not just, it's about a skilled workforce for sure, and what we have to do in that vein. But it's also about trade schools, and it's about kids that look at being master plumbers, master electricians, master welders, and what does that look like? Because there are some people that think that there's shame associated with that. Last time I paid, we talked about that. An electrician or a plumber to come into my house, they're making really good money. Plus, if there are apprenticeships that we're able to really advocate for and sustain, it helps those that start as apprentices even own their own business when it comes to like their own plumbing company, their own, electrician company or what have you. So I think we've got to do more associated with that too. And I think I've been a big supporter of the Alamo Community College District. And what are the community colleges doing? Because college has become very unaffordable for a lot of families. And what are we doing there? So scholarship opportunities, and what are we doing to make sure that even as a county that we're not just relying upon the Alamo Community College District for those scholarships, but are we appropriating money wisely in the right places regarding trade programs, regarding scholarship opportunities for kids that live on the southwest and the east sides of town? And by the way, there are places of poverty on the north side too.
Right,
so,
right, yeah.
So it's all over.
Yeah. And it's kind of like a Project Quest, right? Project Quest.
Right.
They do a lot of trade schools, and even I think in computers.
Right, but it's I'm a firm believer that it's not about a hand out. It's about a hand up.
Yeah.
And how do we propel people into self-sustainability so that they feel proud of what they've accomplished and that they continue to succeed and move up the ladder. Because even as a female, what I've done all my life as a business owner, it's not about just climbing the ladder, right? It's about your hand down to help out this person who's coming up, to help her come up here. As far as, women are concerned, and we talked a little bit about that earlier, I'm a big proponent of failing forward. We learned a lot of lessons. I ran for office, one time in 2009 for mayor, and failed. And I just tell my kids that every day. I have, a 17-year-old daughter who's a junior in high school, and I have a soon-to-be 20-year-old who's a sophomore at UT, who are the loves of my life, that I would lay down and die for any day, as much as sometimes they frustrate you. I mean, they're children. It's like I told you, you never stop being a parent, ever. But you know that when you have children, but they're my greatest joy. But I tell my daughter every day, don't be afraid to try.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to look back on life with regret and say, shoulda, coulda, woulda. And that's the message that I give to young females, across the county all the time when I have the opportunity. Don't be afraid to try.
Is that why you ran for county judge? Because you fought really hard to get to commissioner, right? And it was like, oh, county judge. You're like, all right. Is that what was your?
Yeah, I think there were a couple of things, Eric. I think I was a strong voice on the court. Was called a force on the court. I think I made county government a lot more relevant. One of the things I tried to do, is really after every commissioner's court meeting, I taped a 45-second video that we pushed out on social and digital related to, this is what we did on commissioner's court, 1, 2, 3. This is how it impacted you. Because people need to pay attention to county government. I don't think they were paying attention to it before. So we try to lift the veil, make things a lot more transparent regarding the issues that we were covering and how it impacts you. Because I will tell you, when I walked even running for county commissioner, I had so many people who were like, we love what you're saying. Yeah, we love the fact that, property taxes and appraisal reform are big issues for you, but we have no idea, what does a county commissioner do? I got no idea. So part and parcel of my effort in that first year, and even if I'd stayed as a county commissioner, was to educate people on the importance of county government, because there was a lot of money that flows through there. So city council kind of has tendency to suck all the oxygen out of the room and gets all the attention. But there's a lot of really great things that are happening, at the county level. But there's also some things that are happening that need transparency and for people to pay attention to it, to do that, but we weren't able to. But I will tell you that during the ARPA process, we made sure those work sessions were public. so that people could watch online and do what they needed to do. And of course, the Commissioners Court meetings are all online too. So, the opportunity as COVID wanes, the next budget cycle, to be able to get out there and really show people and tell people what's happening. And I'm glad to lead the charge on that, because I was the only county commissioner, like I said, really trying to educate people on the process associated with what's going on in county government. And we have a little bit of a hardship because we're a subsidiary of the state. So it's a little antiquated when we look at ethics reform, when we look at campaign contribution limits, when we look at term limits and those sorts of things or whatever. There are some things that are very hard to get done because as a subsidiary of the state, we're going to have to get consensus in the entire legislature to be able to get a lot of things done. So if we want true ethics reform, it's going to have to be personal. Like, we're going to have to say, look, for instance, for me, as county judge, I'll serve 2 terms, and I'm out, because I don't believe in career politicians. It's why I ran for office in the first place. If we want campaign contribution limits, we're going to have to say, hey, I'm only going to take this amount moving forward, and what does that look like? So,
because you were one of the, I don't remember if Commissioner Rodriguez did or not, but you denied your bonus, or your, what was it?
There was a pay raise.
Pay raise, right.
Yeah, there's a pay raise.
And so kind of talk about that. Like,
I just didn't think that it was appropriate. We lived through a huge downturn in the economy. Small businesses suffered. I, as a small business owner, suffered as well and felt that pain. I don't think it's appropriate for politicians, when everybody else is feeling pain, to get a pay raise. And so I said I was not going to agree to that pay raise, and I did not. And I will continue to. I think from a county commissioner standpoint, we make a pretty healthy salary, and especially during a time when people are suffering, the last thing somebody who's in elected office needs to be doing is taking a pay raise.
Where does that go? So if you don't accept it, where does it go?
I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know. I guess it goes back into the budget, which is great because it can be used for other things or whatever. But I just was, Eric, it wasn't just the optics associated with it. I go back to, what is the right thing to do? Right. That was not the right thing to do.
Yeah. I think I had posted about it. I was like, what's going on?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But I did advocate. I wanted to make sure that deputy sheriffs, there again, because they were still in their collective bargaining agreement process. And I did have a conversation with the county judge, and I said, hey, we got to get this collective bargaining agreement done. It's been out there for 2 years. There's they're limited resources. They're stretched thin, the deputy sheriff's department right now, and they haven't gotten COLA increases, which is COLA, for those of you that don't know, is cost of living allowance increases for 2 years, whereas everybody else has. These are folks, men and women, that are laying their lives on the line every single day and did not have an increase. And so within the collective bargaining contract, I made sure that we included that within the contract, because it's only right that especially first responders are getting those kinds of increases. Elected officials don't need it. They need it for sure. Yeah.
And let's talk about with that. And I know it just recently passed, but the property tax, it was a $5,000
homestead
exemption, but it equals out to what, $15 a year, I think.
Yeah. Look, every little bit helps. When I was on Commissioner's Court, one of the things I advocated for was a property tax rate decrease, which we had not had on the county in some time. Granted, that only amounted to a small amount, but I was also advocating at the same time, while I was a county commissioner, for the homestead exemption up to $5,000, which didn't exist. So yes, that's $25. Yes, it's for a total of, a net impact of $30. However, we build upon that incrementally, and at least it's going in the right direction. It's not going up, it's going down. But true appraisal reform begins in the legislature. I have some opponents that served in the legislature for some time, had plenty of time to be able to advocate for property tax relief, call for a special session regarding property tax relief. It didn't happen, but that is what it's going to take to be able to really move the needle when it comes to property tax relief. As a Republican, hopefully as Bexar County judge, we have a Republican-controlled legislature. Hopefully I have the wherewithal to go to the governor and say, hey, people are begging for it. And I think the governor's realized it now, because that's a big issue for him as well, that we've got to figure this out, because it's not enough. I'll tell you, as an elected official to say, hey, I got a property tax decrease when appraisals are going through the roof because you and I and you and Salo are all getting property tax notices, and the appraisals are going up 20 to 28%.
Right.
Yeah, because the housing shortage that we have here, the low inventory, and the fact that we have people from all over the United States that are throwing cash offers down on houses.
Yeah.
It's a combination of things, but I'm very glad, that I serve in the Bear Appraisal District, and I'll be on there for 2 years. I did not have to resign that seat,
Okay.
much like I did for county commissioner. So I'm going to continue to advocate, at the local level for what can be done. But true appraisal reform begins in the legislature and the way we fund education in Texas.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's something that I will advise that I'll still continue advocating because I've been doing this since last year as well. Is just making sure that I tell you guys, protest your property taxes.
Yes.
You can do that every single year. Even the people at BCAD will still tell you that as well. Just protest it. It's very simple. There's multiple ways to do it. If you need any help, reach out to me.
So to your point, as a county commissioner, we used to have podcasts and we talked about how to protest your property taxes. And look, I get it. I've done it myself. Mm-hmm. It gets old having to go down there and protest every single year. But if your voice is not heard, it's a rubber stamp. Mm-hmm. So you've got to go down there and you've got to be able to protest. But I also made sure that the appraisal district was going door to door to be able to tell people, because we live in a community, when I talk about the high rate of poverty, may not have computer access. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about educating people, it's not about doing what's only online. It's about going door to door, knocking on the door,
right?
Robocalling people and saying, hey, if you've got questions, if you don't know how to protest your property taxes, we're here to help you be able to do that. Because one of the most important things we can do is in the poverty-stricken areas is, like I said, really educate people one-on-one.
Right.
Yeah. And help them.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to help those who can't help themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is your favorite type of music?
Oh my gosh, I am a huge music lover, and some of it is because I think I told you so. I'm the youngest of 6 children, so with older brothers and sisters, I listen to a lot of music from the 70s. So I'm a huge Earth, Wind, and Fire fan, and 80s. I'm a huge Carole King fan. I'm a huge Loggins and Messina fan. My kids, I'll sing to anything on the radio. Although I'm not going to sing. I'm not going to sing for you. Yeah, I'm not going to sing for you today because I only sing in the shower. Yeah, and in my car. Yes. Yeah. But whether it's big 80s music and the Cars, I was obviously grew up in the 80s and dance that music, but I'm a huge country fan, whether it's old country because my dad listened to Johnny Cash, Charlie Pride, we grew up listening to in the house on 8-track.
Did you ever have poofy hair?
Oh my God, I had huge poofy hair. Yeah, Eric, it was bad. I think my hair is still recovering. It was big. And and you use a lot of mousse and you use a lot of hairspray. I was looking at a picture as I was going through stuff the other day. I was like, that is bad hair. Yeah.
What was the worst styling that you ever done? Like you're like, man, you look back, you're like, what was I thinking?
Yeah. Well, like I said, at UTSA, we used to go to a place called Cooter Rounds that used to be out there. So it was all about who had the highest kind of poof. I probably could do it for you here, but it was way up here, like a flock of seagulls, kind of. Yeah. But those days, wow. I don't know why we thought it looked so good because it was also big makeup. It was like big makeup, big hair, all that stuff or whatever. But my daughter looks at some of those pictures. She's like, Mom, wow. Like, really? Yeah.
When was the first time you were like, you ended up realizing, oh, I become my mom? Like, to where it was like, you're like, oh, why are the kids wearing that? Or why are kids doing that?
Well, when I knew I became my mother is when I told my kids, and she was, my brothers and sisters would laugh about this because she used to tell them, and she told me this too. She was like, as long as you live under my roof, you live by my rules. And I found myself saying that, especially as my son, was in high school and went off to college or whatever. And I'm like, and even when he comes back from college now, he comes back and I'm like, look, this is not a frat house that you live in. This is my house, okay? You can do that if you're away at college, yes, but When you come by here, these are my rules.
No parties.
Yeah, and then my mother used to always say too, she was like, if you count the pennies, the dollars will take care of themselves. And so it's that sort of fiscal conservative aspect that I think I brought to the court, back to, another conversation that we had about holding people accountable. I don't have any problem appropriating money as long as there is a return on investment associated with that. And I want people to come back, whether it's the DA's office, whether it's the public defender's office, whether it's the sheriff's office, whether it's the constable's offices. You need to come back to this court every 3 months and tell us how you're moving the needle in these areas if we're appropriating the money. Because the only way we get better is to look at metrics. And if we're not moving the needle, how do we pivot? How do we shift? What do we do? And I think that's another thing that I called for on the court was I wanted to see data. Yeah, because data is the only way that we improve things.
So with UHS, do you feel that that's being properly looked at to where it's constantly being scrutinized to make sure everything's...
Well, it's like I said, it's the biggest line item in the budget. And George Hernandez, who's the CEO of UHS, I think does an amazing job. But there's also an opportunity it's another taxing district, right? It's another opportunity for a homestead exemption at that taxing entity. So when I talk about building upon tax relief incrementally, yes, there's an opportunity there. So we need to be looking at other taxing districts associated with how, we lower the tax impact on folks. Because I will tell you, I've talked to a lot of people who are like, when I look at my, appraisals and what comes in or whatever, the Bexar County Hospital District is a big one. Yeah, so what do we do to provide relief there or whatever? So, look, as long as we know they're scaling impact, and like I said, I had conversations about the merger conversation. There's an opportunity. I think UHS is open to it. But there again, every time I asked George Hernandez to come in front of court, he did. Yeah, especially during the pandemic when they stood up almost overnight the vaccination center there at Wonderland of the Americas. But if we're spending that kind of money regarding a line item, they should be coming back telling us what they're doing, not just during the annual budget cycle, but like I said, every 3 months, show us, what we're doing and what are you doing right and how can we improve things.
Gotcha. With everything that's happened in the past couple of years, what are some things that you think we learned as a community, as a government, that we can do better?
Well, I think what we learned was we needed to have patience. And patience, not just with each other, but also patience to be kind to each other. I think there were emotions that were running very, very high. But we were also in a place where there was no playbook regarding what we needed to be able to do. I've talked about the fact that I don't think we needed to be shutting down small businesses. I think that was a huge mistake. But I also think that we've got to give businesses the individuality associated with how they want to be able to operate those businesses, whether you wear a mask into a place or whether you don't wear a mask into a place. We've all got to be careful associated with that. But I think what we've seen are mandates don't work. There's a lot of blowback associated with it. But being a communications person, yes, it was all about regular communication. And I do think that is something the city and the county did very well together regarding the updates that happened. And, I think it gave people comfort. They felt like, the county and the city were being, good stewards of what was happening during the downturn in the economy regarding the pandemic, and regular updates regarding the hospital situation, what was going on, and, critical care units, and what we did, even what we stood up over at the Coliseum regarding infusions for folks. So I think we'll be better prepared. The thing about the county is, what most people don't know is the county judge and the county, they are the go-to people when it comes to emergency operations. And it's not just during a pandemic. It's during a hurricane. It's during a tornado or what have you. Yeah, I mean, we never know when another pandemic will come along. And look, at the end of the day, we're going to have to live with this kind of like we do a flu. I mean, much like the flu outbreak that happened. We're going to have to get a flu shot. We're going to have to get a COVID shot. We're going to have to get boosters and what happens there. But we got to make sure at the county that we have emergency operations in place to be able to deal with these issues. And one of the things I called for as a county commissioner is that during the pandemic, we need to have the private sector at the table, the military at the table, and government at the table. And probably some constituents at the table too, so that everybody's weighing into the process. Because, for instance, the zoo, during Snowmageddon, we haven't even talked about that. And CPS Energy. But during Snowmageddon, I was on some calls, and I didn't feel we had enough private sector folks at the table. And so when the zoo called and said, hey, we need a generator, because we have waters that are frozen, we have birds and all kinds in our aviary unit or whatever that, and reptiles or whatever that won't survive. Who did I call? I called Holtcat. Because I worked with them over the years and said, hey, I need a generator. And he was like, well, tell me what the specs are. Of course, I didn't know anything about generators or specs or whatever, but, I talked to...
What's the biggest one you got?
Exactly. I talked to the zoo and I got the specs, and I learned a lot in the process. Holt made it happen. They got, they were able to source a generator. They got it out there. One of their engineers were stringing cable. He was sending me pictures as he was stringing cable. Hey, ma'am, I just want to let you know we're out here. We're getting this done or whatever. And they got the generator up and running, and they got the water heated because they had alligators and snakes and whatever in the restaurant at the zoo because they had to keep them out of the cold. So that's what you also do as a small business person. You are uber resourceful. Like, you don't wait. You spring into action and figure out what it needs to, what it takes to get things done.
So how do you get through with all the government red tape? How are you able to accomplish things with having to deal with those?
Well,
things?
I think it's building consensus. Obviously having good relationships with folks or whatever, but it's also, just having a mind that says, hey, we need that person at the table, we need that person at the table, we need everybody here to come up with the best solution. And, we've got, a great military presence here in San Antonio, which is, there again, is one of my most, what I'm proud to talk about is my dad was a 25-year career Air Force veteran, who taught me about grit, not just grit, but about grace. He, reads the Bible every single day, but what does it take to be able to get the right thing done? And I think that's sometimes in government, we rely upon what we've always done. But
Air Force is very much work smarter, not harder.
Yes, but it is all about, like, when you bring new perspective in because you haven't been in office before and you worked in the private sector for as long as you have. There's that perspective that's like, what do you mean we've always done things that way? That's not the answer. The answer is, how do we do things differently? And to your point, working smarter, not harder, and more efficiently. So, I love that part of being able to bring that to government because I think it's been sorely missing for a very, very long time.
Yeah, with Snowvid or Snowmageddon, there was a real lack of communication.
Oh gosh, there
was with the government in general and the community, and it was really sad. And I actually had people reach out because I was posting constant updates and, hey, you can get water here, and actually some people were I was connecting some people with getting water to some people and food, and they're like, we're not, where's the government? Like, nobody was out there, and they were relying on social media people to get that information. So what is something that, learning from that, what is something you would like to implement forward?
So I think there are a lot of lessons that we learned out of Snowmageddon. I tell people at neighborhood associations, et cetera, I am not going to leave you in the cold. When it comes to CPS Energy, we have to demand accountability associated with that. And we need, again, there are a few things. We've got to have better representation on the board of CPS Energy, and that does not come easy. Probably about a third of the revenue associated with CPS Energy comes from outside the city of San Antonio and from suburban cities. Yet, we share in no revenue whatsoever. And granted, I understand it's a municipally owned utility, so it's hard for the county to say, hey, we want our fair share too, when the city owns it. However, if a third of that revenue is coming from outside the city of San Antonio, from suburban cities, and we don't have even the county judge as an ex officio on the board of CPS Energy, that's a little bit like taxation without representation. not taxes, but they're paying
Yeah.
into it, but we don't have the appropriate representation that we need. So, but from a communication standpoint, it was sorely lacking. I mean, I was very vocal on the court when I said it was like the Hunger Games.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like every man for himself or woman for himself. I don't know if you're familiar, the story, and I think it led to the demise of my mother. She was living in a assisted living facility, which lost power, and got up in the dark to go to the bathroom and tripped and fell and broke her shoulder. Had to crawl out into the hallway in the hopes that somebody would find her. And when they've once found her, then the roads were iced over to get her to a hospital to get care. And I'll be honest with you, Eric, it's been a very, very tough time for seniors, which is why I have a huge amount of heartfelt compassion for the elderly associated with what happened to my own mother. COVID basically cut them off from people, which we understand they couldn't be because they were the most vulnerable. But there was no communication, and when you're elderly, part of like what keeps you going is, mental and being able to be with people and with loved ones, and they weren't able to do that. So you compound COVID with what happened during Snowmageddon, and they lost power, they were in the cold, they were in the dark, they were suffering, they were freezing, they were by themselves. It's a horrible, horrible situation. And so for my mom, and I'm sure maybe with some other seniors, it was kind of like, you know what, I just think I give up. I don't really have the will to do this anymore, because the past 3 years have been incredibly difficult for seniors. So aside from representation on the CPS Board of Energy regarding the county, one of the things that I want to do is that assisted living facilities should be on the same grid, the same power grid as hospitals, so that when we do lose power, those that are the most vulnerable, whether you're in a public housing situation or you're in an assisted living facility, should not lose power, because they don't have the resources and the wherewithal to be able to help themselves. When I'm county judge, that won't happen. It will not happen again. And a lot of it there again comes with communication. And look, we were not just left in the dark literally. We were left in the dark from a communication standpoint because nobody knew what was going on. I was demanding from my constituents. I was talking to them. I was on the phone. And look, I lost water and I lost power for 3 days. So I know what that's like. But I was still trying to help the zoo, constituents, whatever I had to do on the phone all the time regarding, water sites that needed to be established because people did not have potable water, especially in the far-reaching areas of the county like Fair Oaks and what we were doing out in that area too. So we got to do better by people. Yeah. We got to do better.
And the people really came together. That was really cool. And I actually saw two opposing sides politically come together, and it was really cool. To see that, just you know what, it doesn't matter.
Look, that's when we're at our best, right? It's about us as humans, right? It doesn't matter about party. It's about us being humane, to each other,
right?
Yeah.
What has been your most challenging moment where you feel that maybe you either made a mistake or you could have done better?
Well, we can always do better. As not only a mom. As a sister, as an aunt, because like I said, I'm the youngest of 6 children. I have 21 nieces and nephews. You feel like, look, was that a teachable moment with my kids? Could I have done better associated with that? So, there are moments, especially with children, that you always think, hey, I got upset about that, but maybe taking a step back, I could have done better because they're kids, right? On Commissioner's Court, I was very proud of the fact that I was able to, achieve bipartisan support for not only a tax rate decrease, but a 10-day body cam policy, turnaround policy that is one of the strictest in the states. So regarding what I could have done better, could it be regarding, just from an outreach advocacy standpoint, making sure that we're continually reaching out to people and listening to people, because I think that's the hardest thing as a politician is you want to be everywhere. I mean, you wish that you could clone yourself to be able to do something better, to be able to improve things. So, I think it's a matter of prioritization. I think for me, I wanted to get so much done when I came into office. I mean, I was like, let's do this, let's do that, let's do that. Blah, blah. I was like, bing, 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 bing. I mean, that's just kind of my personality. But sometimes you have to take a step back and say, hey, what are the priorities versus ticking off everything you want to do, in your first year? Can you spread that out a little bit so you've got more bandwidth to be able to be out there in the community and really listening to the things that are important?
Now, the things that you do, is it just a list of things that the constituents have told you, or just things that really matter?
Yeah, I mean, I think part and parcel is going door to door. I mean, my victory in Commissioner's Court and on that seat, I went through a very competitive primary process. There were 8 people. Went into a runoff, ran against a 40-year career politician, who had huge name ID, and it was during COVID. I mean, I could write a book on what it was like to campaign during COVID.
It was terrible.
It was bad.
It was terrible.
I mean, I really was like, really? This is the year I decided that I was going to do this? I'm like, just shook my head. I was like, I don't know what you're telling me, God. I don't know.
You can campaign, but you can't go door to door.
Yeah, but with that, you know what? We did continue to go door to door.
Mm-hmm.
We went with the mask on. We stood 6 feet back. Mm-hmm. People typically were comfortable talking to you as long as you were back and you had a mask on. Sometimes they would come outside and walk outside the door, but we took the campaign to the doorstep. Mm-hmm. That is what we will do this time too, because there is no more better learning opportunity and the humility associated with talking to people and knowing what they're going through and knowing what you need to do and what you can advocate for as an elected official than when you're hearing people and you're listening to people. And that is something we're about to kick off. We're going to do a DeBerry Dialogues tour, across the county on the southwest, east sides of town regarding things that are important to folks. I've had some great conversations already with small business owners. We're over on the deep west side and what needs to happen, because when you look at economic development here in Bexar County, east side has SAGE and what's being done on East Commerce and what's being done in Dignity Hill and what's happening there. There's some good economic development opportunities there. When you look at what's happening on the south side, there's been a boom regarding the south side, infrastructure, what have you out there, more to be done there, obviously. But the north side, when you look at the Broadway Cultural Corridor, when you look at the amazing amount of growth associating with the northern end of the county, there is very robust economic development there. The one side of town that really has not benefited is the west side of San Antonio. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that is because the jail is there on the west side of San Antonio. And so I've had conversations with folks about, apparently when Commissioner Elizondo was in office, he had a plan, or he was working on a plan to maybe fund a new jail. And so I think that's something we have to look at, because I think it hampers economic development over on the west side of town. That's a big footprint, right? Mm-hmm. So if you could move the jail, build a new jail somewhere else, even though expensive, we'd have to take a very close look at that, obviously. I'm not advocating necessarily for that until I know what the cost is associated with that. But the opportunity associated with being able to raise the old jail, it's a huge footprint for economic development, what that means for the west side of town. So that way, every side of the county and the city is prospering. And there's a great organization on the west side, Prosper West or whatever, that's doing great things there too. But we've got to be looking at everything through not just a county-wide filter from an economic development standpoint, but a regionalization filter associated with economic development.
Do you think with the possible decriminalization of marijuana, which just passed the House of Representatives, going to the Senate, do you think that'll bring any change to the amount of people that are in Bexar County Jail? Do you think that'll possibly make it to where we might not have such a big footprint?
Yeah, I certainly think there will be some alleviation. I mean, we've got to look at, how we look. I mean, we have to look at how we tackle the homeless problem. Yeah, here in San Antonio and Bexar County. And there again, that's not just a downtown problem. No. I mean, I hear about it in District 8, I hear about it in District 9, I hear about it in District 10, which incorporates 8, 9, and 10 are all of Precinct 3. Mm-hmm. There's a homeless problem there. So, we all need to come together and figure out what is the strategy. I think tactically, we've tried to throw money at the problem, and we've had tactical solutions associated with the homeless. But as you talk to somebody like Gavin Rogers, who helps to house the homeless, who told me when I was down there, when we had a cold snap here, found a homeless veteran on the street that was suffering from cancer, who had been released from the hospital out onto the street, knowing he had cancer. This man was skin and bones. That cannot continue to happen. I mean, God bless Gavin. He took this man into his house until he could find health care for him. But if we have hospitals that are releasing folks like that, and a veteran no less, look, it shouldn't happen to any person, but it certainly shouldn't be happening to our veterans. We have a lot of PTSD issues regarding the homeless, and what are we doing there? But I don't think that we have systematically tackled the homelessness issue that we have in this county in a holistic way. And that is, there again, bringing together government, bringing together the business community, bringing together the faith-based community, because we have a gem, obviously, in Haven for Hope, and they do a great job. However, not all of the homeless want to go into Haven for Hope, because you have to abide by the rules when you go into Haven for Hope, and many of them don't want to. So what are we going to do about those that will not and absolutely refuse to go into Haven for Hope, who have synthetic marijuana drug problems, who have PTSD issues? What are we doing to tackle that issue?
Yeah, so it's a real big problem, and a lot of people don't want to go to Haven for Hope for a lot of reasons, but it's just such a delicate issue, and we don't want San Antonio to become Los Angeles, right? That's we're seeing how everything's getting over there. It's really bad, and
and as a obviously it's been a long time since a female has been in power as county judge. It's been a very long time since there has been a Republican as a Bexar County judge. So when I jumped into the race, obviously there wasn't a huge Republican presence, obviously, in the judge's race. And so I got in because I said, hey, look, there needs to be a robust dialogue on both sides of the aisle, associated with what we need to do and how we need to move the county forward. Being born and raised in San Antonio, I feel like my DNA is here. I want my kids to be able to come back. Maddie and Scott to come back to San Antonio and find good paying jobs and not feel like they've got to go elsewhere. My hope is they're as committed as I am, to the nonprofit community and really making our community better. But, it's also about, even as a Republican judge, even though I'm outnumbered on the court, because you'll have a Republican in the precinct, but it still means that you'll have two Republicans, you'll be outnumbered. What I will tell you is that I'm never going to walk off the dais. I'm never going to flee somewhere else because times get hard. I'm going to stand my ground, and I'm going to fight the good fight. Because we saw what happened in the legislature, right? We had folks that, understandably, it was difficult, that fled on a private jet and went elsewhere, and still collected a per diem, meaning they got paid to go somewhere else and they weren't doing their job. I'm never going to do that, no matter how outnumbered I am or how difficult times get. Constituents elect you to fight the good fight, to stand your ground and do it no matter what the circumstances, no matter what the obstacles. So that's what folks can count on when I'm Bexar County Judge.
All right. What is your favorite shop to shop at?
lots of favorite shops to shop at. Yeah. I like to support local for sure. So, there's some good places here in town that are locally owned, that are boutique based. In fact, I have
you could do a couple.
There's, I'm a huge supporter of what I would consider the cultural arts here in San Antonio, the creative class, because what I did for a living for a long time or whatever was really about creative writing and what that looks like. So, whether it's art, whether it's, clothes, whether it's shoes or services, the creative class needs to be supported. So, I have a Cruz Ortiz piece, of art that's in my house that was down at Blue Star years and years ago when nobody even knew who Cruz Ortiz was. And I've had that conversation with him about that. He still remembers what that piece looks like. So, shoes, Lily shoes that are down in, the Pearl or whatever. Yeah. So, but, I also have, a Fiesta crown of flowers that a local artisan produced that I got when I was down at Chanclas y Cervezas last year down at Brooks. So I bought that.
Did you throw a chancla?
Yeah. I did throw a chancla, yes.
What did you get? What was your score?
I think I got 20 points.
Hey, that's good.
Yeah. But let me just tell you, it was very cathartic from a stress standpoint to be able to throw your chancla. Yes. I'm about that all day long. Yeah.
And okay, so there's this question that I've heard from it's a small group, but there's the lowrider community or the car groups in the city that seem to be getting a lot of flack from government for them not, they're being singled out. So is there something that you think you can look at from that standpoint to kind of see where there's kind of mutual respect from there? Because it seems like they're getting hit really hard for actions of other people that maybe, they're really directly linked to negativity from the government.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes things are, they're complicated conversations. And a lot of it is about the kind of press that's received on a topic, the optics associated with it. And so you can't judge a book by its cover. And sometimes you can't believe necessarily everything you hear. So, but it's about sitting down with that community and talking about how do we compromise? How do we get ahead of the curve regarding what you want to accomplish and what is your mission? And how do we help you do that from a government standpoint rather than throwing up roadblocks and impediments associated with it? Because I think that's kind of the knee-jerk reaction, right? Is, oh, it's bad. We're hearing a lot of complaints or whatever, but there's a mission at the end of the day. So how do we dig in, which I think I've, had a history really even during my tenure on Commissioner's Court of finding problems or looking at what are the issues or what is the problematic circumstance associated with the issue. But how do we create a win-win associated with it? Because it's not necessarily about you're the bad guy, I'm the good guy. It's about how do we work together to accomplish the mission that you're trying to advocate for.
And a lot of these people, they have some great missions. I've spoken to them personally. It was just like, wow, like you wouldn't think of what they're trying to do. And it's like, okay. And it's just that message doesn't get conveyed a lot to whoever's looking at them like, oh, it's negative. So what are some last things that you would like to say regarding your campaign and some of the last words?
Well, I mean, we talked about a lot of them. I mean, we're going to focus on a number of things. We're going to focus on property taxes and appraisal reform. I campaigned on that as a county commissioner. We'll continue to advocate for that. But like I said, it's not just about what we're doing at the local level. We've got to make sure the legislature hears loudly and clearly. We've got to figure out a way to advocate for and really bring about solutions to really bring about true property tax relief and appraisal reform, and it starts at the ledge. But there are definitely things that we can do here. Secondly, talked about it again, domestic violence. It is a scourge on this community, and we've got to do whatever we can to appropriate resources. And I will use the office as a bully pulpit to make sure that we're advocating for those that can't advocate for themselves. In fact, one of my favorite shows on Netflix, if you haven't seen it, watch it. It's called MAID, M-A-I-D.
Okay.
So it's with Andie MacDowell. And her daughter actually plays the lead character. And I think what's so compelling about MAID is it shows how incredibly difficult it is for the working poor who really want to work and bring themselves out of poverty, and how difficult it is because of government bureaucracy relative to bringing themselves up. And I credit my daughter who watched the show and said, Mom, you need to watch this. And it can be depressing and it can be disturbing because it's for those folks that really were trying, I mean, desperately trying with a child to better their circumstances, get themselves out of a toxic environment, find a job, bring themselves up, find daycare, find transportation, all of it, bring themselves up. It's one step forward, two steps back, many times. And it's so hard, and it becomes, because of that, it becomes a lot easier to go back to a toxic situation versus trying to fight for yourself, because the government does not make it easy. We've got to do better by women and children that are living in domestic violence situations, and especially for those women who want to better themselves and are trying to bring themselves out of that situation. And then thirdly, what are we doing about public health? We've talked about that regarding really scaling impact here, because that's how we bring ourselves up out of poverty. And then what are we doing at CPS Energy? Because that impacts greatly economic development here, not just in our city, but our county. But at the end of the day, what I thought I brought to Commissioner's Court was bold, brave, and big ideas. And I think, that's the tagline for the campaign. I am bold, I am brave, and I am better for Bear. So
nice.
With that, vote Trish DeBerry for Bear County Judge.
And how can people get a hold of you?
They can go to the website. They go to trishforjudge.com. Yeah. Shoot, you can call me if you want to. So, yeah.
Okay.
I'm always, feel like I've always been somebody who's hugely accessible to people. I don't, put somebody up in front of me. Like, I want to have the conversation. So,
gotcha.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Trish. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you, Eric.
And
This has been fun.
awesome. Yes.
Yeah.
And just
I'm glad
know
we picked the right color.
I know, right?
Yeah.
It's like, hey, and again, don't mess with her. She knows how to throw a chancla. Okay, so no. All right. Well, thank you everybody for watching, and please stay tuned. More interviews. Please engage in your local politics, not just the national politics. Please engage. You need to learn who these people are, ask questions, be informed, and make the best decision. Thank you, guys.